Welcome back, ghosts, ghouls, and things that go bump in the night. Do you ever have the urge to just walk into the forest and hopefully never walk out again? I think we all have. And if you get me, then you're my kind of people. Today's story is the perfect example of that kind of thing. So, why don't you settle in, relax, and listen to The Door That Leads to Nowhere. When people come across something unexplainable, they try to find rational reasoning behind it. I mean, it's only natural, right? Well, sometimes things are better left unexplained. I learned this the hard way. It was a cool Thursday afternoon. I had just gotten off work and wanted to take a stroll to clear my head. I find it therapeutic. Temperatures weren't too cold, but it was cool enough you'd want to wear a thin jacket. Typical fall weather. As I walked, I felt the breeze blow through my hair as it whistled in my ear. Usually, I only walk through my small neighborhood on the sidewalk, but I found a rather large wooded area. I decided to walk into it, thinking that a change of scenery would be nice. As I wandered into the woods, I heard the crunching of leaves beneath my feet. The further I'd walked into the woods, the more trees I began seeing around me. I told myself that it'd probably be best if I didn't stroll too far, so I wouldn't have a hard time finding my way back. As I continued to walk at a steady pace, I noticed a small dirt trail. Not thinking too much about it, I followed it. It led me to a cove of some sort, with enough trees surrounding it that it formed a pretty big circle. The dirt trail ended, and there was no path ahead, just a circle with surrounding trees. The ground was covered with a ton of leaves, but one thing in particular caught my attention. A door. A door in the middle of this forest cove. It was possibly the strangest thing I had ever seen. My curiosity caused me to walk up to it. It was no bigger than your average house door. It had a dark brown color to it and was very clearly made out of wood. The door was old, but still stood sturdy and strong. I put my hand on the door and felt its rough wooded exterior. It had a door frame around it, so that if you could open it just like any other door would. I looked down at the doorknob. To no surprise, the doorknob was just as old and ruined as the rest of the door, but still sturdy. I reached down and grabbed the knob. It was black and metal. The knob was cold due to the cool fall air. I tried turning the knob, but to no avail. It felt like the door was locked. I tried twisting and turning a few times, but again, the door did not open. I walked to the other side of the door and tried the knob one more time. I was met with the same results. Something inside of me wanted to open this door, no matter what. I tried kicking the door, but it was surprisingly way sturdier than I thought. It felt as though it was bolted to the ground. I looked at the ground around the door. After kicking the leaves away, I came to a discovery. The door frame was inside of the ground. The door must have been there for quite a while, because the ground around it showed no signs of digging or tampering. I messed with the door, trying different ways to get it to open. All of my attempts ended in failure. After failing, I realized it was getting quite late and decided to head home. At my house, I made a small dinner and turned on the TV. After flipping through multiple channels, one channel caught my eye, the news. Why not, I thought. I kept it on the news channel and started eating. They had been reporting on a murder that had happened recently. Apparently the victim was a 24-year-old man with blonde hair and was in a wheelchair. He had been shot in the head by some people who were robbing a nearby store. Gruesome stuff, I said to myself. I finished up my dinner, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. The next day was like any other weekday. I worked at a small town retail store. It wasn't your ideal job, but it worked. It put food on the table and paid the bills, and that's all I really needed. After working a long and tiresome shift, I clocked out and went for another walk. I found myself walking towards that same forest I went to yesterday, but somehow I didn't realize it. Eventually, I ended up at the entrance to the woods. I took a deep breath and entered. Seeking out the dirt trail was quite a challenge, since I didn't remember exactly where it was. After a short period of time, I finally found it. I followed the trail and reached the strange cove. What I saw before me was the worn-out wooden door. I ran up to it and immediately tried the knob. It was still stuck. I was frustrated because I really wanted this door to open. It was almost a need to me. I began pacing back and forth in front of the door, thinking of the many ways I could get it to open. As I continued the pacing, I noticed a slight elevation on the ground in front of the door. I looked down and kicked the leaves out of the way. What was revealed was a very dirtied welcome mat. I hadn't noticed it before. It was written on the mat, "Lift me." I picked up the mat. Under it were several dead bugs. I instantly threw the mat and took a step back. What the... I looked down and saw a key in the middle of all of the disgusting dead creatures. It was broken into 2 pieces. I picked them up and inspected them. The keys were rusted, and there was no way I could glue the 2 together. I took the end of the key and put it into the lock on the door, but it wasn't long enough. I had to have the whole key. I looked up and saw the setting sun and the sky growing dark. I stuffed the broken key into my pocket and turned back to home. Today is Saturday. I had the weekends off, and so the whole day is free. I made up my mind to find a way to get this key fixed somehow. There's an old antique shop in town, and they can fix old things that were broken when you brought them in. I decided to try my luck with that. I parked right in front of the shop. It was a small store right between 2 others. I exited my vehicle and went into the shop. I looked around and saw a variety of items around me, everything ranging from home decor, musical instruments, paintings, and mirrors. I looked forward to find an old man sitting at the counter. He seemed really old, and had that grumpy look. He had a messy white beard, and the few hairs he had on his head were white as well. He was reading the newspaper, so he didn't really notice me at first. Excuse me, sir." I waved at him. He looked up at me. His left eye was cloudy, and his right was a light blue. "I was, wondering if you could get this fixed for me?" For some odd reason, I was very intimidated by this old man. I showed him the broken key. "You want me to fix a key for you?" His voice was deep and raspy, his teeth yellow and rotten. Some were missing. Yes, please," I answered. He held his hand out. His hand was very withered, very wrinkly, almost like a skeleton's hand. I dropped the key pieces into his hand. "It'll be a while," he spoke. "No problem." The old man grabbed his cane and slowly walked to a door that led to the back of the building. I waited around the store for what seemed like half an hour. The old man came out and I walked up to him. He reached out a key in his hand. I took it. The key was whole again, and though it still felt a bit rough, it seemed like it would work. I paid him for his work. "May I ask what you are doing with this old broken key like that?" I looked at him. "Just, found this old house and hoped this key would work. I'm curious to see what's inside," I answered him. The old man smirked and said, "Curiosity killed the cat." He then laughed with his rotten mouth. I nervously giggled. I thanked him and sprinted out of the store into my car. I got in and drove to the forest. I arrived back at the spot where the door was, walked up to it, and faced it. I tried the doorknob just to see if anyone else may have gotten it to open. My curiosity was soon answered with a locked door. Figures, I said to myself. I looked down at the lock and took a key out of my pocket. I slowly inserted the key into the lock and turned. The lock slot turned with the key. I put my hand to the doorknob, twisted it. This time, it twisted all the way. I then pushed the door forward, and it opened. I could hear a creaking sound as it slowly swung forward. What I saw was just the other side of the door. Nothing special happened. I stepped through the door frame and closed the door behind me. I looked around. The air began getting colder. The wind was whistling louder. Fog began appearing around me. What was happening? I didn't understand. Then I saw something, or someone, rather. What crept out of the fog was a man in a wheelchair. "Excuse me, who are you? What's going on?" I asked. I was met with silence as the man came closer and closer to me. The closer he got, the better I could see him. He had blonde hair, but his face was covered in red. There was a hole in the middle of his forehead. It occurred to me that I had been looking at a dead man, the same man I saw in the news the other day.
"Let us out,"
he choked out. Frozen in fear, all I could do was stand still, even when he came closer. I slowly started walking backwards towards the door. I tripped over something as I was walking back. I fell to the ground, and I soon saw what was beneath me. A dead body, a mangled corpse. You could only tell it was a body because the head was still intact. That head slowly turned towards me.
You could free us,"
the head spoke. At this point, I got on my feet as quickly as I could and ran towards the door. It seemed as though the door was getting further than it was before. I sprinted and screamed, "Help! Someone help!" I yelled. The fog had cleared up a bit. As I ran, I looked around and saw more and more dead people. Some were hanging from trees, some were on the ground, bloodied, some were still walking towards me, the ones who still had legs to walk with. But there was one thing they all had in common. They all seemed to be speaking. I couldn't hear what the ones furthest from me were saying, but the ones closer were whispering, "Let me out. You can't leave. Stay with us." The ones who weren't saying anything were crying or screaming. All I could hear around me was whispers and screams. I reached the door and fumbled the key out of my pocket. They were getting closer to me. I was shaking so much I dropped the key to the leaves on the ground. I reached down and rapidly brushed the leaves away so I could get the key. I grabbed it and inserted it into the lock. I quickly twisted, pushing the door open. I ran through the door and slammed it shut behind me. Breathing heavily, I noticed the air warm up and the fog vanish completely. I ran from the door, still yelling, "Help, please, someone!" All I did was yell. As I ran further from the forest cove, I ran into a police officer, flashlight in hand. There was so much going on I didn't even notice how dark it had gotten. "Whoa, calm down, what's wrong?" the concerned officer asked me. I was panting. "Listen, you have to come with me. There's dead people," I yelled frantically. "Listen, calm down. I'm here because we've been getting calls about screaming going on in the forest. Was that all you?" No, not just me. There's people. They need help. You've got to help them," I pleaded desperately. "All right, bring me to them. I'll get them help right away." I led the officer back to the cove, but what I stumbled upon shocked me. The door wasn't there. It had completely vanished. "What am I looking for?" the officer asked me. "Wait, it's not here. It was just here," I yelled. "What was?" The officer looked at me, very confused. I looked down inside. Nothing. It must have been my imagination. I was defeated. Are you sure you're all right? The officer asked me while pointing to his head. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not crazy. Well, I'm gonna stick around and look for a bit, just to make sure. You head home, all right? Get some sleep. Yeah, I'll do that. I walked out of the cove and made my way out of the forest. Every day since then, all I can think about was that incident. What was it? Was it all just a dream? I know none of my questions will ever be answered. No one is ever going to believe me either. If I try telling someone, they'll definitely think I'm crazy. The door may have disappeared, but the key remains. Why? Don't ask me. I don't have a clue. I can't bring myself to get rid of it either. I always keep it on me. Maybe I'll stumble out that door again, and curiosity will kill me one more time. And that is the story of the door that leads to nowhere. What would you guys do, ghosts, ghouls, and things that go bump in the night? Would you open the random door in the forest and get a glimpse of what lays beyond? Let me know. You can send me an email at hauntedhorrorstorian@gmail.com, or you can always find us on Facebook at Haunted Horrorstorian Podcast, and in our private Facebook group, The Haunted Horrorstorians, Ghosts, Ghouls, and Things That Go Bump. Come hang out with us there, and let us know what kind of experiences you've had. That's all for today, so until next time, listeners, stay spooky, and remember, sometimes it's more than just a story.